I heard they want the news. Well, we got it just for you. What's your team? Who your player? Who your crew? I heard they want the news. The spotlight is on you, and if you in the hot seat, it's times two. I heard they want the news. Come tune in to the crew, but we got the hookup just like black and blue. I heard they want the news. Spotlight Sports, what it do? Hit subscribe and that like button too. I heard they want the news.
Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.
Oh, isn't this just so fabulous and so good to be back? This is the Snake Sports Talk Show wherever and however you may be watching and listening. We are live on all social media platforms from around nationwide, iHeartRadio, and we're also on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, where you can like, subscribe, follow, and hit the bell button for all latest notifications on everything you can catch on the one show that keeps you interested in our network. That's the Snake Sports Talk Show and the Spotlight Sports Network. And before I end up making my grand entrance on this, I want to say thank you to Spotlight Sports Network. And for as long that we have possibly gone on with the time of me and my absence, we have done such a great job expanding, new people on the blocks. I couldn't be more proud and happier of our network. And we continue to make strides to make this the better running platform and running network all across all social medias. So I appreciate what Spotlight Sports Network has done through the time being, what we're currently doing now, and what we may prepare for the near future. So thank all of you. And by the way, we had such a great opportunity from the weekend before, getting news coverages of the Super Bowl and before with all of the latest interviews and such. This past weekend's been such a great refresher for me. My family and I and my girlfriend, we ended up going out to Dumont, having a great time, shredded some dirt and some dust, and I couldn't be happy to be back and be more refreshed and focused for this time being. I really appreciate every single one of you guys, all of your love and support. It just feels great to be back. So, with that being said, we've had a lot of things happen all around in sports, but I'm going to start with this. So, there's been a lot of news reports that we've had in the coming days, and I couldn't wait to get back on. But, of course, the latest news was surrounding of Colts quarterback Carson Wentz. And it really boggles me how everything, and I mean everything, started they started panning out, and how they started to, at first start to really kind of play this thing out. And it really interests me just exactly how all of this started to really kind of take place. But to me, I just feel like with the Colts scenario and their situation, you were on the fences of defending Carson Wentz after the trade, and all of a sudden, here we are in the backlash. Let me give you something that was really on my mind in these last couple of days before even jumping on to today's show. But I think this is a bad move for the Indianapolis Colts to even consider, because the news of it is, by the time March comes around the corner, the Colts are strongly considering trading or releasing Carson Wentz. It's been a year. You fought hard and you ended up trading away draft picks for Carson. And then in the end now, you're wanting him out of town. It's interesting how some of these front office moves, it's really interesting how this all kind of comes about. But to me personally, I think this is the wrong move. And I don't think this is smart. What I started to see this with Carson Wentz is you're looking at a quarterback, and it's kind of interesting because I think of this. Certain companies, it's interesting because even if you have the most productive person in your workplace that does all that they can, and all of it has to deal with a lot of what upper management's really doing, what they're doing behind closed doors and behind the scenes. The only thing I can think of with Indy is that this is a Jim Irsay thing, because the Colts want to win right now. They feel like they have the roster. And here I am, as a sports talk guy, really giving you the exposure of what the Colts are. In certain companies, you have a working person, keeps his head down, doesn't have to worry about all the chaos that's all around him in the front offices or where, CEOs or whatnot are dealing with, and mostly managers. And, I've had something where no matter what happens in the workplace, and if the management still works and acts the same, things aren't going to get better. In Carson Wentz's deal, this is where I can solely compare this to a lot of different scenarios. And I'll give you a few. Think of Las Vegas right now with the Raiders and Derek Carr. Not easy with what Derek Carr is going through, but still has spurts of production that is the fine line of who the Raiders are. And Derek Carr's the sole piece of that. He's what keeps the Raiders together. You lose him, you'll lose every single opportunity that you have of even making the playoffs and further and beyond. And Carson would be the same similar person with his production. Another couple of them. Ryan Tannehill is the only reason that Tennessee can be productive. Even without him, it's not going to be the same offense. And we know that it runs through Derrick Henry, which it does. It's true. And Derrick Henry is the sole piece. Once he went down on injury, the Titans were completely Ryan Tannehill reliant. And until it burnt out and the Titans were knocked off in the first round of the playoffs. Like, that's it. There's a couple of others I can think down the list. But ultimately, the Colts are making such an irrational decision about Carson Wentz's future, because this is a guy who's completed 63% of his throws, 27 touchdowns and 7 picks, and a quarterback rating of just about 98. And you want to move off of Carson Wentz like that easily. It's like we treat these quarterbacks like how we treat diapers. Easy to change, easy to end up getting new ones, when really it's not that easy. It's not that easy being a quarterback in the NFL. And people will tell you that mostly. And this Carson Wentz deal is just ridiculous because you would think coming into Indianapolis, reunited with Frank Reich, his head coach, who was also a former coordinator in Philadelphia. And the funny thing of it is everybody wants to refer back to the Philadelphia days. Get over yourself. It's already been a year. He's not in Philly anymore. The last thing we need is to bring back old memories. The only ones who can basically understand that feeling are Eagles fans. That's the only ones. But they have no hurt for it, basically for what happened with Carson Wentz. They know that it was a messy scenario. And in the end, this is what it panned out to. And that's the way we look at it. In the end, Carson Wentz gets dealt to Indianapolis, and Philly is now left with Jalen Hurts as their starting quarterback, who makes the playoffs, gets knocked out against Tampa Bay, but still they were able to click. They clicked very late. The run game was efficient, and I don't understand why they didn't keep up with the run. But in the end, it worked for them. And I think the future would be interesting and bright for Philadelphia. Plus, now they have the future first-round pick that Indianapolis ended up getting, and they have it now in the draft. But Indianapolis is making one of the worst decisions. If you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of why the Colts had not made the playoffs, it's very simple. Carson had no help. The only ones that was very efficient is the defense and Jonathan Taylor. If you really want to be honest, Michael Pittman's a really good wide receiver talent, but he's not enough. I don't consider him to be a number one. I think he's played more of a two. If you went out on the market right now and all of the wide receivers and tight ends that are on this free agent market, the Colts should be worried about building around Carson for as much as they can. And I know people get irritated sometimes of just his judgment at quarterback. We get that. But it's not always Carson's story. The biggest thing of it is, if you don't have enough of the support around him, he can't work with it. And he struggles. We know he's often reckless, but he's not as reckless as a Sam Darnold. And Darnold's already to the point where he looks like he's regressing. If you really, really want to make this thing work with Indianapolis and with Carson Wentz, I would not move off him. Because honestly, outside of Jimmy Garoppolo in this market, there is not a single quarterback that I can trust. And since Andrew Luck's retirement, there have been 5 different starting quarterbacks for this organization. Scott Tolzien, Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett. And then there was a little bit, you're going to trust Sam Ehlinger and Jacob Eason as your starting quarterback? I don't think that's such a bright move. And Carson is maybe the most inexpensive option you may have. The other one is Jimmy Garoppolo. But I doubt that if it gets to this point, if they say no to Carson Wentz, I will tell you there are teams that are really, really considering getting Carson. The Browns, the Steelers, and the Broncos. Those are the only 3 that I can consider that could trade for Carson Wentz. You don't think, because of what's happening in Cleveland's scenario and with Baker Mayfield, they're not going to pick up the phone and want to make a trade? I guarantee you they will. Pittsburgh would be on the phone tomorrow. And they've got Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson. They might have Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't think so. But they've also got Najee Harris, and all they have to work is the offensive line. And they've got a really good young tight end. They'd be all over this thing in a heartbeat. And then Denver. Noah Fant, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, and Cortland Sutton. You don't think Denver would be on top of it? I'd really consider your options, Indy, because ultimately, you may not like sometimes the decisions that a quarterback makes, but not every quarterback in this league is perfect. We just saw Patrick Mahomes struggle, And the loss against Cincinnati was on Patrick. We saw Aaron Rodgers struggle against San Francisco, and that was all Aaron. Quarterbacks are not always perfect. But if you make the right decisions at the right time and at the same time, you're at least being patient. Because remember, we know patience itself is a virtue. But if you're overly impatient and incompetent, sometimes those things rush back at you. And that's the way that I see it, especially when it comes to Carson Wentz. Good to have everybody here. Coach Dante, Mitch Kovsky, Philly Sports Talk, key in the building. Shanna's Life, B. Al, long time no see, everyone. Prince Sean, I'm glad you guys are all here. So I wanted to shift to this, and I know that this is something that has been quick, but I've been hearing it all day. And I haven't really paid attention so much into college basketball, but I've only caught up with a few games. But of course, the one big thing is what's been happening. What happened just this past weekend against Michigan and Wisconsin. I could tell you this from right now. When it comes to certain professionalisms, no matter what job that you're in, you got to act professional as much as possible. No matter the stakes and no matter how high the intensity is, college sports has always been the building bridge to a professional lifestyle. It always has. And even going from beforehand when you're in high school, maybe you're in like Pee-wee leagues or whatnot, those are the building blocks. And the only ones that could keep up with them are the ones that are fully invested. So what caught my attention, of course, was the Michigan and the Wisconsin game between both these head coaches. And I'm just going to say this. No matter the stakes and no matter what the scenario may be, because honestly, when I watched the replay and I saw everything that had happened, I thought it was ridiculous. Like calling a timeout 15 seconds, you're already up 15 points. It's embarrassing, but in the worst part possible. I know that it's not exactly a call I personally would make, but it's not a call that any coach, no matter in the NBA or in college, would ever make a call like that. And just in the end, by how everything erupted, I don't think this is something that both coaches even get out of very easily. Not that easy. And so after seeing this, Juwan Howard, by the way, Juwan Howard's very, very professional. Nice gentleman, is a guy that's very professional with all of his players. And just to see this erupt, I mean, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the sport. It's embarrassing for the kids. We have a thing here at the network, and we know people that watch this network. It is such a beauty because ultimately it's professionalism, it's fun, and it's also something that is a building bridge to potentially work for a career. That's something that I've always wanted to do. Broadcasting, television, radio, anything that I could possibly get my foot in the door. But it all comes from matters of how you manage chaos. And in the end, like I tell my girlfriend and we talk to each other about it because we're very motivating people. But we know that when it comes to certain actions, there's a reaction to it. And college sports is such a beauty because we hear stories. We hear a lot of these up-and-coming prospects. And it's so fun to watch. And a lot of backstories behind a lot of them. Because not everybody is born and raised in the same backgrounds. They're not built up the same skill set and the same type of mindset as everyone else. But we know that there is a fine line. There's a balance with professionalism and with, at times with common courtesy. And when I looked at this whole thing with Juwan Howard, I was disappointed. Very disappointed. And both these coaches acted childish. And the fact that one lays a hand on one of the other coaches, lays a hand on the other, and then all of a sudden a striking punch. One thing we tell ourselves, you don't know who's watching and listening. That's why when it comes to certain censorships, you have to take that by heart. We know it sucks, and we know it's something that often brews up. It's not easy, folks. But in the end, there's a job at stake. And we know exactly how coaches react when it's in the heat of the moment. It's not an easy thing to do. But it's also one thing to react upon it very rationally and very harsh, and at times, because kids are watching this type of stuff. The kids, the parents, everyone watches this kind of stuff, and they got sorely disappointed. Now, in the end, I do think Juwan Howard's a really good coach, and so do I think of the other coach in Wisconsin. But both of them, I do believe there is a certain line of disciplinary action, and I do think it involves suspensions. Now, I do think Juwan Howard should be suspended longer because of the striking punch. But in the end, both are not going to get fired. I don't think it's the smart move to fire both of these coaches. It should, determination when it comes to disciplinary actions should not be based upon feelings. It should never be. You're in any management, or if you're in any type of corporation, it should not automatically just be a fire the person. Strike them, you're fired. Because sometimes you may not ever know how a person really comes back from it. But I do think in a disciplinary action, when it comes to suspensions, I think it's the right thing. But because to me, if I'm a CEO and I'm a manager and I have some type of hostile workplace where both of them are not really getting along, both of them now are kind of in this position where there's physical altercations now and it's getting out of hand, I'd be sitting both of them down. I'd be hashing it out. And at the same time, suspensions and disciplinary actions. Because ultimately, no workplace should ever have to feel as hostile. And that's in every workplace. And in the end, you see with what the productions are, you also see exactly how they carry themselves, because that's not Juwan Howard to basically react the way he did. It is unfortunate, but we learn from stuff like this. And again, if an action like this plays out again, that's where I would think it's a firing. And that's what tears up coaches' careers forever. But I truly think disciplinary actions and suspensions is the right thing to go about it. I'm not a big person on firing them automatically. I think it's kind of rash and it's kind of over the top. But I certainly do think that there should be suspensions for both. And Howard having the longest one. It's a straight up assault. That's the bottom line. But remember this. Sometimes there's always a certain tier of how far it gets until termination happens. And that's where I just think, in the end, both of them, this was child's play. This was embarrassing. And again, and my big thing is, if you did this with any of the kids, any of the players, I would straight up termination. Because what kind of role model and what kind of example are you setting for these kids? That it's okay to just punch a kid in the face, that it's okay to start tossing chairs. Man, there are some people that sometimes gets into hostile environments and they don't even realize it. And some that do, but don't care. You'd be very surprised. There are some that are basically like this. But I'm telling you, this is why they don't get these kinds of high gigs. College coaches, professional coaches in every bodies of sports. That's why they won't get these types of gigs. But there are those that are like that. But that's where you really have to set an example right, really start to evaluate yourself from the inside out and how you can fix these things. But I think suspension's the right thing to do. And ultimately, I I do truly think Juwan Howard should have apologized at the podium because of everything that was taking action on live television. But unfortunately, that didn't end up being the case. Coming up next, and of course, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the LA Lakers because right now, we had the All-Star game. Steph Curry wins MVP, and LeBron ended up setting the tone in the All-Star game in Cleveland. But I want to talk and break down a little bit of Lakers here because honestly, I do see with the way the production is going, I think we all have kind of come to that conclusion. Lakers are just not the same team. But it does remind me of one other team in a different sport that I see the similarity. Plus, two, on our best for last, I have a serious PSA announcement for Major League Baseball. I have a serious PSA for Major League Baseball, and you don't want to end up missing that on the Snake Sports Talk Show. All right, folks. Well, you've heard me talk about this for a long time, even while I was absent. But I'm bringing this back up again, and I do say it is very legit than you think. Best stuff that I've honestly have tried out for the first time, and now in the year of 2022, a lot of things have expanded. And I'm talking about the revolutionary app that is, you can download it on your mobile device through Google Play, and the app store is called Super Draft Pro. And now opened up is Super Draft Pro Sportsbook, and Super Draft is the proud partner of Caesars Entertainment. Now we have a sports book where you can start betting on prop bets, start betting on certain games and different matchups. And with the more virtual currencies that you can get, you could be winning up to hundreds of thousands of different prizes left and right just by going on to the sports book today on the Google Play and the App Store. And plus, too, you also have the Super Draft Pro app where you have thousands of different contests happening every day of every week. And just before, we've got now UFC, we've got NASCAR, we've got golf. Lots of things are starting to update as the seasons are approaching. So what are you waiting for? If you want to play like a pro, draft like a pro, win money like a pro, and hang out and just having fun with your friends like a pro, there is no other app than Super Draft Pro. That is superdraftpro.com. Download it on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store.
Pressure. Some on these gas get hectic. I put my bitch in the best shit. Wanna act goofy, stretch quick. Pressure. Some on these gas get hectic. I put my bitch in the best shit. Wanna act goofy, stretch quick.
I'm a Raider. Ain't shit you can tell me, I'm a Raider. Ain't shit you can tell me, I'm so nation. No matter the location, from OAK, LA to LV, I'm a Raider. Ain't shit you can tell me, I'm a Raider. Ain't shit you can tell me, I'm so nation. No matter the location. This got the 83.
Bitch, I'm a ball, bitch, I'm a ball. Don't get no ball, don't get no ball. What's in my cup? What's in my cup? Full of that punch, look at that punch. Bitch, I'm a ball, ballin' like Kobe. Ho, keep it moving, cause you do not know me. Bitch, I'm a ball, ballin' like Kobe. Ho, keep it moving, cause you do not know me. Bitch, I'm a ball, can't talk in Milwaukee. Tell my dog sick of me, ain't do no barking. Pass me some greens, you know I'ma spark it. Mama got ass, told her to arch it. Pull up at the spot, hop out and don't park it. Bino say, always keep one in the cartridge. With Joey out purpose, so we going toxic. Came from the swamp to visit the tropics. Check out the scenery. Tell her mama to the backwoods right by the lake.
Well, guys, glad to be back up here on the Spotlight Sports Network and on the Snake Sports Talk Show. You know, it really got me thinking as well, talking about the LA Lakers. And, you know, it's interesting because I started seeing everything of what the Lakers have been this whole year. And we all know that things have not worked out with Russell Westbrook. And Anthony Davis has become an injury liability. And LeBron James is LeBron, you know, and recruiting a lot of these players. Carmelo Anthony is not healthy. So, of course, during the All-Star game, there was a little bit of a gesture that was made on LeBron's end where he started talking about, you know, Cleveland and seeing the young talent that's there. And I honestly would not even consider bringing upon LeBron at all. Because the only thing of it is that it's only been twice. He's been playing with Cleveland. If he tries up for a third time, knowing you've got all these other youngsters that I think they're playing really good. I mean, I don't think it should be at a position to even bringing up LeBron back into Cleveland and thinking it's easy. It's not. I think, honestly, I wouldn't even consider it. I would have just automatically have denied a deal or anything that could basically get LeBron back in Cleveland. I mean, the kids are fine. This is what Cleveland needed. They needed an entire refresh button, and the kids that are all playing right now actually are pretty solid. There's nothing I think that the Cavaliers right now need to do. But my point about the LA Lakers right now and the way that things are playing, and I've said this before, the 21-22 Lakers reminds me of one other team that have basically played the way that they have, with all the superstars, with all of their main components that the team trusts, and where they finished. Because right now, as I'm looking at the divisions and looking at the standings, because it's not a great scenario right now for the Lakers. As I'm looking at the standings in the Western Conference, Lakers right now are sitting ninth at 27-31. Now, they could try and sneak their way in any way that they could, but it's not going to be that easy. Right now, you've got Phoenix, Golden State, Memphis, Utah, Dallas, Denver, Minnesota, the Clippers, Lakers, and Portland. Then also you have San Antonio, New Orleans, Sacramento, Oklahoma City, and Houston. And we all know the stories about all those teams. But I beg to differ right now of where this team really is. And I don't think this is definitely a team that stays healthy and could even compete to the amount of young bloods that are there. And I honestly don't know how this is even going to work out. What's going on? What's going on, Cincinnati crew? But my thing is that watching the Lakers this year reminds me of watching the 2008 New York Yankees. And let me explain to you why. Because both teams, what they have in common. Take, for instance, Derek Jeter and LeBron James. Now, we know LeBron has bounced around so many places. Been in Cleveland, been in Miami, been back in Cleveland. He's back, and now he's in LA. And it doesn't seem like he wants to leave LA's market anytime soon. I don't think he wants to. But here's the thing. LeBron is coming up into his age, and Derek Jeter was the sole captain of the Yankees that year, 2008. Who were his components? Jason Giambi, Bobby Abreu, Melky Cabrera, youngster, Mariano Rivera, Andy Pettit. There was not a whole lot of young bloods at all. Jorge Posada. This was kind of bad. And the Yankees, they finished 89-73. They were third in the AL East. Didn't make the postseason. And Mike Mussina also, one of their old pitchers, was already past his prime since Baltimore. And so this needed an entire refresher for the Yankees because a lot of these players were already up in their late 30s and starting to creep up into their 40s. That's why Mo didn't pitch as long. That's why Jeter didn't play as long. That's why a lot of these other players were past their primes and they were not the same since. But yet, Brian Cashman and Rob Pelinka, both similar style general managers, all just want superstar talent. That's what they want. If LeBron James says, I want Carmelo Anthony, I want Anthony Davis, I want Russell Westbrook, I want all these, of course everybody's going to listen. But it hasn't worked out. Carmelo is past his prime. He's hurt. He's injury prone. Anthony Davis is an injury liability, not working in LA. Russell Westbrook right now is slowly starting to erode. Not the same player as he was, even though he's had spurts where he could be energetic and he could be a triple doubles guy. But it's not the same. And then you have a lot of these old veterans. And it still is not working for the Lakers. The Yankees were in the same similar boat. They were 89-73, and they finished third in the AL East. You want to know what happened the following year in 2009? Let me give you something. They were 103-59 in 2009. What did they find out that was wrong? They couldn't have all these older veterans that were past their primes. It doesn't matter what their stardom is. They realized they couldn't have it. So what did they do? They spent every single one of their money because baseball's got no salary cap, so they could spend a fortune. And the Yankees went out and got A.J. Burnett, CeCe Sabathia. They had Jabba Chamberlain that was coming up as a youngster. They called him up. They called up Phil Hughes. They ended up calling up Brett Gardner. They get Mark Teixeira. They had a young Robinson Cano that was up in the making. Melky Cabrera was just getting better. And then they ended up getting a bunch of other really good pieces. A-Rod was coming back from all of this PED scandal. He was a part of that. He was a part of that team. And then the other part, they had Hideki Matsui also was past his prime. He was not the same player. So they ended up getting all these youngsters. They went 103-59 and they won the World Series. I'm not saying this is a similar scenario that could happen for the Lakers, but look at what the Yankees did in 2009. They realized 2008 was not the year, and they realized that was not the scenario they should have gone about. Everybody was past their primes. They were not producing the same way that they were, and they had to get an entire youth change, which now look at them today. The Yankees are not the type that want to build talent. They're not like the A's. They're not like the Astros. They're not like the Braves. And they're certainly not like the Cleveland Indians. They want to build the prime. They want to build every single one of their players through the minor league system in the farms and make them potential superstars. The Yankees are not like that. They're incompetent. They want to win now, and they have the money to do so. That's why they spend it more That's why a lot of these high markets, Yankees, Dodgers, they all want to spend all this high money on big time talents because they don't want to spend the time building it. That's the truth and reality. The Lakers are the same similar boat. They want to spend all their money on all these stardoms and all of these veterans, but in the end, they don't want to end up building up a lot of these youngsters. I remembered that the time when it was the downfall of the Lakers. 2013, they had Kobe. They had the late Kobe Bryant, close to getting past to his prime. Then there was Steve Nash and Dwight Howard and Derek Fisher. And then in the end, no time for building up Vladimir Radmanovich, Jordan Farmar, all these other youngsters. It just was not working. And then when they started getting Julius Randle, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, all these other youngsters, and even D'Angelo Russell, they all ended up pushing them out because they didn't want any time to build youngsters. While all these other teams like Utah, like Memphis, like Atlanta, they were all building up all their young talents. So unfortunately, this is the reality, though, that the Lakers have to get through, and they've got to get through this very, very, very fast. Time now for the hot press. All right. So, latest news up onto the hot press here as we're pulling it up. But as I've stated before, so Goran Dragic so far, after last being with the Toronto Raptors, is signing for the rest of the season, joining the Brooklyn Nets. So agent Bill Duffy of the BDA Sports ended up announcing that to Adrian Wojnarowski. Dragic began the season with the Toronto Raptors before he was sent to the San Antonio Spurs at the trade deadline and subsequently had his contract bought out. The Lakers, Warriors, Clippers, Bucks, and the Bulls were all considered suitors for the longtime veteran, but instead has chosen to play with the Brooklyn Nets. The 35-year-old had an outstanding postseason history in his penchant for immediately taking a leadership role with teams. He's played 5 games with Toronto this season before he and the Raptors came to an agreement that allowed him to work out away from the team until a trade could be found. And in his 15th season, Dragic has recent playoff success on his resume, starting in 16 postseason games. So something to really consider for the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, I honestly don't know how that this will definitely work out with Brooklyn, knowing that you've got Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons. I mean, it might work with Seth Curry. I think it might build up a lot of veteran experience for Seth Curry to kind of build his way up a little bit more because he's a guy that's putting up 20 points a night. So I don't think this is a bad idea, but I do think it's very interesting. But we'd have to see how Goran Dragic will really pan out in the coming days. So the XFL, to provide the NFL and to being treated as the petri dish for football innovation, prospect development as part of partnership agreement with the NFL. So they're focusing more on creating innovation programs and protecting the health of players. The XFL officials made clear that the collaboration will not include players sharing for development purposes, but the alignment is notable given the growing number of alternate leagues in the football landscape. The XFL is scheduled to resume play in February 2023 under new owners Danny Garcia, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Redbird Capital Partners. So even though with the USFL starting to come up around the corner, the XFL will soon be making its way back into the scene in the coming days. So it'll be very interesting to see how this really plays out, but I do like this. I do like the partnerships. I think this does help both organizations really be better at their player safety. I also do think it's innovative when it comes to rule changes and whatnot. So this will be interesting. Outgoing Pittsburgh Steelers general manager Kevin Colbert ended up giving quarterback Mason Rudolph's vote of confidence. So with the retiring of Ben Roethlisberger, it's now up for grabs on the quarterback listing with Dwayne Haskins, Mason Rudolph. on today, an outgoing general manager, Kevin Colbert, gave backup Mason Rudolph a vote of confidence as saying, I quote, "If we started the season today, Mason would be our starter, and we're excited to see where that can go." Mason's 5-4-1 as a starter, albeit in a backup kind of role, but we're excited to see what is next for Mason. So Mason had only started one game for the Steelers in 2021 and an 11-hour decision after Roethlisberger ended up testing positive for COVID-19 the day before Week 9's game against the Detroit Lions. Rudolph ended up completing 30 of 50 attempts for 242 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception in the game that finished in a tie. Rudolph started 8 games after Roethlisberger's season-ending elbow injury. It was a tumultuous season for the then second-year quarterback that finished with him completing 62% of his attempts, 13 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. I personally, as I said, with the Carson Wentz deal, I would seriously consider it because Mason Rudolph, I don't think I'm going to end up getting much out of production from his side. I really don't. I do think it's the right thing to do for Pittsburgh, but in the end, I mean, I get the gesture of confidence from the general manager's perspective, but let's be honest here about Mason Rudolph. I just don't think this is really how the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to end up going around, because my one thing is they may go and they may end up getting, Carson Wentz, or Jimmy Garoppolo that's out there in the market, either of those two, whichever is available on that market. But I do think my idea, if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, definitely get yourself a veteran quarterback. And I do anticipate they might end up taking Kenny Pickett if he is available. But if you go out and you get Carson Wentz, my big thing is you got Chase Claypool, you got Deontay Johnson, you got Najee Harris. I do like the opportunity. So that was your hot press. Coming up next, I have my PSA announcement for everybody here about Major League Baseball and how I'm feeling about it, because I do think it is time. And by the way, we're in a perfect scenario and situation on a Monday, on a President's Day, because I do think I got to make my announcement with Major League Baseball in a big way. So you guys do not want to end up missing that here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Well, guys, it's coming in fast, and we know springtime is going to be right up around the corner. And there's nothing getting hotter than all of the deals we've got on our Spotlight Sports Gear merchandise that you can catch it on the spotlightsportsgear.com. T-shirts, hats, hoodies, so much more, even accessories to getting you to repping out your favorite network here on all social media platforms. And of course, your favorite shows on the network: Snake Sports Talk Show, MK Headlines, the Big Time Show, and so much more. You guys do not want to end up missing that here on the spotlightsportsgear.com. Get your gear in today and rep it up for your favorite show and your favorite network here on all social media platforms. spotlightsportsgear.com. All right, folks. First and foremost, I really do appreciate every single one of you guys coming on. It is so good to be back. Um, very, very happy to be back here doing this again. I know it kind of took a little bit of hiatus time, but I really do appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being here up on the show with me. You have no idea how much that this means to me, and to all of us here on the network. It's been really, really good coming back here. I did try for the in arena host jobs, and honestly, it didn't pan out. And I'm very glad that it hasn't. But in the end, you never stop trying, and but in the end, there's always room for improvement. And at the same time, there's room for growth. So I'm very glad to be back here again and just to be doing this. I loved the media day. I loved my media day experience, honestly. I thought it was great getting a chance to interview Zach Taylor and getting a chance to interview Van Jefferson. I thought it was great. Joe Wall, the merch is actually really, really good. It's really good. Really good top tier breathable t-shirts. The hoodies are also amazing as well. Keeps you snug and warm. Even the accessories like coffee mugs, phone cases, and so much more. Stickers as well. Anything you want to anything you want to end up repping the show, the network, and so much more at the spotlightsportsgear.com. All the merchandise is all there, all the prices. Definitely shop up whatever you want from all of the shows, and of course, all from the network at the spotlightsportsgear.com. But yeah, I thought my experience there was great, and getting a chance to talking with Van Jefferson and so much more. Quite an awesome experience, and I really do thank the Spotlight Sports Network for the for that gig and getting the opportunity to do it. We unfortunately were not able to get the NFL Combine, but we are definitely working on our ways to getting more and more of the media experiences as we speak. So with that being said, there's no better way of closing off the show. Oh, yes, and there's 15% off the merchandise going on right now. So there you go, Joe. Perfect opportunity to end up buying some merchandise as well. So there's no better way, really. And I've been lurking on with Major League Baseball, and I'm sorely and sadly disappointed with the way that things have really been going on. Because honestly, we now ended up getting news reports that spring training has been delayed, and we're not going to be having baseball anytime soon. And honestly, I have a feeling that there is not going to be a season anytime soon. I'm really sick and tired of everything that has been happening revolving around Major League Baseball. I think it's sad, embarrassing, disappointing, and something needs to be done about it. So, because it's President's Day, and something that, of course, when you have the new appointed president, you want to be congratulated. You want to be welcomed in. So for me, you all have heard it from me first. I am putting on my ties. I'm putting on all of my stuff, and I have a PSA announcement to make for everybody here on the Spotlight Sports Network. Is I'm officially putting in my candidacy as Major League Baseball commissioner. I mean, no better way than that. I mean, yes, it's not an easy job being a commissioner as a whole, but it's something that's it's something that honestly should be taken seriously and very considerable with everything that's happening around in the sport. So that is why I am personally putting in my candidacy. And there are a lot of things that I can point to, because so far we've had so much that has happened in Major League Baseball. It is sickening. It's disappointing. So I'm putting up a few points of mine that I really, really do think should work well. Let me see if I got some background music here for this. Let's see. No, it doesn't really. No. whatever I can to get at least some real good background music. I don't know what I can get, but hopefully good stuff. No. Oh boy. Well, other than that, I think I might just end up. Yeah, I'll just wing it from here. Well, unfortunately, with not really the best of background music. Oh well. So anyway, there are a few things that I want to point out to Major League Baseball that needs to make a change. Because unfortunately, Rob Manfred is not doing the job as all of us would have been promised and all of us would have been excited for. And it's terrible. It's beyond terrible, and there needs to be a change. So, with that being said, your potential candidate for Major League Baseball commissioner, myself, I'm putting in, these are the points that I have from here. First point, I really do think that this should be the time and place to now start to put in a salary cap. Because right now, with the way that things are playing out, this is not good for the body of the sport. Payouts are being paid everywhere. Lots of players now want max deal contracts that are further about 13 years. And a lot of them, we just seen Juan Soto turn down a 13-year, $350 million contract extension with the Washington Nationals. Where is all this money coming from? We have no idea, honestly. And it just seems like the players' unions and the commissioner, and not to mention, too, like a lot of people involved. It's ridiculous. And money's flying around everywhere. You see it with the Padres right now with Fernando Tatis Jr. with 13 years on his belt. You've got Bryce Harper, 13 years, 330. So all this money spending is getting out of hand and ridiculous. So I think it's time for a salary cap because let's be honest, folks, the NFL has been so successful with salary caps that they know what their max contracts are. The only exception to the rule is Patrick Mahomes. But remember this, just because he's the exception of the rule does not mean that he is the potential change for the future. Okay? Because most of these payouts, because I know what I'm getting with Patrick Mahomes. He's a hell of a quarterback, has a hell of an arm, and has definitely got leadership skills. This year definitely took a turn for the worse, but it's not the end of the world. But sometimes when it comes to money managements like this, you could pay somebody to play their only position in the sport. But then what are you really guaranteeing in the end with your pitching staffs and so much more? This is why that all these major max payouts are just ridiculous. So I think a salary cap put into this league needs to happen because it should be a reality check, and it also should be a snap for the owners, the players, the unions, because this needs to really, really start taking a step forward for this. Because having a financial mediator, and after as long as this lockout has gone on, this is ridiculous. Number two, I do believe that universal DHs should be in this league because, and they did approve it, which I'm very happy for, but I do think very highly of the universal DH because let's be honest, what are you paying a pitcher to do? You're paying him to give you 6 quality innings, or you're paying him each inning from 7th, 8th, and 9th to go for the potential save, to keep the leads intact, and also to start them off fresh from 1 through 6 at best. 7th inning is optional, but 1 through 6 is my amount. I'm not paying a pitcher to hit. The only exceptions to those are Zach Greinke, Jacob deGrom, Madison Bumgarner, and so many others. But the universal DH is kind of convenient, especially for the National League. Could you imagine how many World Series titles the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Braves, the Nationals, a lot of these teams would have? It would be an open playing field, and I do think it levels it a little bit more. And pitchers can now just work on the one thing they do is just pitching mechanics. They don't have to end up working on batting. Now, it's very optional for some because, again, you could put in Zach Greinke at any point as being a pinch hitter. Now, it won't tamper with as far as his start. It would just basically be, oh, he's coming in as a pinch hitter, because we have, we have a situation at hand. And that's sometimes could be the biggest upper hand. That it's a game of chess for some of these managers. It really is. And I do think putting the universal DH in the spot for the National League is perfect. It's perfect. It evens the playing field out, and pitchers could focus on the one thing they need to, and that's pitching mechanics. Another point. The only time the runner at second is accepted is only in the regular season, not the postseason. I like the runner at second base rule in extra inning during the season because at least it closes up a lot of these games. What if some of the other sports been able to do well? The NBA, it's kind of questionable because it obviously goes into overtime. There's really no other way of ending a game very easily because NBA doesn't really have that problem. But the NFL, they do have, the overtime rule. Now, some people have felt, their mutual feelings about the overtime rule and the coin tosses, but it's not completely bad. But NHL, once they're past regulation, they do have a shorter overtime, and they also do have a potential shootout if it gets to that point because there has to be a winner in the regular season. Postseason should not have these rules because it's postseason, it's pressurized, and it's a fun, exciting time. This is where the real men step up from the boys. Because ultimately, this is where you learn how to control pressure. This is how you learn to control a lot of situations. And if you can't control that, that's a you problem. And that's where sometimes you got to work and adjust it. But I do think having a runner at second base during the regular season in extra innings is acceptable, but not accepted in postseason. Because postseason's fun. That's the only time that people will even tune in for baseball. Postseason. That's all they do. That brings up my other point. Be comfortable with the fact that television ratings are not going to be exactly as you want them to be. Let's be honest. Because the NFL is king when it comes to television ratings. Why? Because it's on a weekend. It's on Sunday. Everybody wants to end up watching sport. And the funny thing of it is, football is so king because the fact of you've got players that have personalities and at the same time, their skill levels are starting to grow. And you put them on Sunday and then have college football on Saturday. And sometimes too, like even here in the Vegas Valley where we have Friday night lights, we love it when we watch high school football. But sometimes that's exactly where you hit your ratings. So sometimes you got to think about all those things to consider from. The NBA is about the second tier, but it's gotten both in the nation and also internationally, where we're getting a lot of players overseas. Luka Doncic and a bunch of others that are starting to play overseas. They're exciting to watch. And I also do feel like that they're very impactful in certain areas. The NHL, their television ratings, now, even though that they signed a 7-year contract with Turner Sports and ESPN, it's a little bit different. They don't have NBC. They don't end up having, a lot of these big time television broadcasters, even though AT&T Sportsnet, Fox Sports, and so many others have been televising it. But now ESPN has been able to get the okay of televising a lot of big primetime games. And I thought they've been pretty good at it. It's not great, but it's been pretty good where they got the primetime games and it's getting a lot of hockey fans involved. But what baseball lacks in this is that nobody's going to watch 162 games a year. They're not going to do that unless if you're a diehard baseball fan by heart. That's the only time I think it's acceptable. But nobody's going to be watching that long of baseball. I don't think it's possible. The other part is you don't even have potential matchups at all. Like, what is the big thing that people like in baseball? They love rivalries. The Bay Series,
the Freeway Series, the Subway Series, the Citrus Series, a lot of different rivalries. AL versus NL, even some that are within the NL. Like people want to watch Dodgers-Giants rivalry. People want to watch Phillies-Braves or, Cardinals and Cubs or sometimes Cardinals-Pirates. They like those in-division rivalries because sometimes you never know what you're going to get in baseball. And a plus two, you got to think of the Chicago series, North and South. And I mean, trust me, if you don't know what I'm talking about, look at the histories of North and South. They do not like each other. And the only one best that knows it is Mal Gooley in the Gooley Zone. He knows that. One of my colleagues knows how it plays out, and he's a Cubs fan. So if you put in more rivalries, and at the same time, Major League Baseball, what I thought was interesting is how they did their television deal. They spent $3 billion in Fox Sports, mostly from what you saw from the Angels. And the Angels are not even in the postseason. They've only been in the postseason once, 2014. And every one of these television broadcasters, I remember the time where Fox Sports was big on it because we had, we had all of the broadcasters from the Florida area. We had, I remember too, growing up, there was Fox Sports West, Fox Sports Prime Ticket. There was a bunch of these other places, Fox Sports Ohio. And there was also, too, like on Cox Cable, where they had Channel 96. I could watch the Padres from there. There were so many possibilities of watching baseball. Now it's kind of taken away from all these television deals. And now you're starting to see Bally Sports really take over things on all different networks. Be okay with the fact that they're not going to overlap the NFL. You're not going to overlap the NBA. And you're certainly not going to overlap the NHL. But that's because of the fact they're not there tuning in to all these games. They're tuned in for rivalries. They're tuned into really good even up matchups, and that's it. The other part that's also should be expressed is whatever happened to the quote-unquote let the kids play slogan. I don't think we're even doing that. You've got uniforms. You've got different customizable gloves. You've got different cleats that these players wear. Let them wear this because this is showcasing the tradition and the evolution of the game. We're not changing the tradition completely. I don't think that's even the case. We are evolving as the sport grows on. And a lot of places nowadays, the NFL, you see them with, my cleats, my cleats, my cause. You see the NBA with all these showcase, shoes that they wear on the court. I mean, can't baseball end up getting on the same track? Like, I know we have a lot of these traditional people, but we're not here changing tradition. We're innovating it. I mean, there's a status quo that we're looking at. And that's where I truly think baseball would look its way. It would look much, much better. I feel like it could kick up a little bit of the ratings, but it's something that the slogan, you let the kids play, honestly. Another point at hand, I really don't. And I can't believe this past year was really about that. I do not care where exactly the remote areas in the All-Star game are. If it's in Georgia and if it's playing in SunTrust Field, then let it play there. Don't end up changing it because of political reasons. Because the fact of the matter is, when it comes to politics and when it comes to sports, there is a certain line that I draw with it. Because especially when it comes to baseball, I mean, you take away the All-Star game from the Atlanta Braves and you end up giving it to the Colorado Rockies is only telling you one thing. That they're like, you need to fix your state. You need to fix. Don't tell me how to run my state. And first of all, we're playing sports. Sports unifies countries. Sports unifies states. And it unifies everyone as a whole. That's what baseball is all about. It's not here about dividing because of one person's thought, one person's feelings, all this stuff. I really, really would not mind it this much, honestly. Now, if it got to a point where it was like way over the top, I would consider it. but I would not end up doing it because of certain political reasons. You have a remote area, like I guarantee you, when you're watching the All-Star game and you're either in California up in Los Angeles, or you're up in New York, or you're up in Texas, or even if you're up in Florida or in a lot of places, because trust me, we had the All-Star game in Marlins Ballpark in Miami, and usually by this time around, tropical storms start hitting. The only ballpark that has not hosted an All-Star game was Tampa. That was the only time, because Florida has tropical storms. But remarkably, Miami was not as bad. And I thought it was great. I thought it was great scenery. But I think Atlanta would have been great because SunTrust Field, I've heard a lot of great reviews about it. And I would not mind it as much, honestly. Another point that I would make with all of this is we've got to have better writers when it comes to the Hall of Fame. I am done with all this stuff when it comes to certain writers. When it comes to Hall of Fame, I am not caring about what era they came from. I am not caring about the culture that they are. We all know this. This is common sense stuff. After I've seen Roger Clemens and Bobby and Barry Bonds get snubbed from the Hall of Fame, I mean, nothing lit me up more than the fact that they cared more about what the era brought them rather than just what they've done on their own statistics. I mean, if you really want to get a deep dig, I've been a baseball fan and I played it, I've watched it, I've grown up with it. I have a baseball background, okay? And when I looked at Barry Bonds, you could say what you want to about him, but there was nobody in the history of this league that got walked intentionally several times, because especially with bases loaded. If you look up on YouTube and watch Barry Bonds get walked intentionally with bases loaded, that is how much respect these pitchers have, because they don't want to pitch to him. He's got the quickest bat of a lefty, 762 home runs, and also hit 73 in 1 year. And this was, yes, at a time, the PEDs. I get it. And the first person to really emerge that, Jose Canseco, then it started to kind of build around with names like Mark McGwire and Rafael Palmeiro and Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa. I get it. But remember this. If you watch the 98 season, when Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and Ken Griffey Jr. were on the run of the most home runs to hit in a season, God, that was exciting. It was exciting. But here's the part, though, that gets confusing to certain people, because whether or not it explained about the era, it really did. It explained about the era. Because I'll give you a perfect example. After watching that snub, I'm serious, after I had watched it, the first person that came to mind was definitely Pete Rose. I mean, Pete Rose got snubbed out of the Hall of Fame because of the fact of the gambling situation, all this other stuff. I was beyond livid. And I had to speak to a lot of people about it, because ultimately, Barry Bonds, you could say what you want to about the PED scandals, but once that got lifted, if you saw the news report that drugs now were not going to end up being screened, no longer by Major League Baseball, I laughed. Because then why did we snub out these two out of the Hall of Fame? I have my reasons about Roger Clemens, but there was nobody who had a faster swing as a lefty. But then in the end, this is what sucks about it. Because if the writers really did vote in Barry Bonds at the end of the day, what does that now mean for Pete Rose? Nobody will ever break his all-time hits record. Nobody in the history of the game will never break it. But we've come to a point that years and years and years after, we don't even think about that stuff. And then all of a sudden, like, I get it with players' safety and protocols and then all the rest of this drug screening. I just thought it was ridiculous. But I seriously considered that fact. But that's exactly how I ended up putting this approach. I seriously think we need brand new riders. And I'll be honest, and I'll nail this one in the coffin, because baseball is a dying sport right now. And it's embarrassing the way that things have been going around right now with the commissioner, with the players union, with all like Tony Clark and all of them. And they're not even finding a balance throughout all of this. We don't even know if we have a season. And I don't think we're ever going to have a season. But if you want a perfect explanation of what is going on around in Major League Baseball, just look at our administration. That's the only way I can say it. There has been nothing that has been done right. There's nothing that has motivated and that has moved us along in our status quo. And our nation's administration is the perfect example of what's happening in Major League Baseball's commissioning committee. That's it. I mean, I just think it's sad and disappointing, but this is why I'm putting in my candidacy, and these are every single one of the points. I think all of these have a valid reason, and I do always think that all of these have a valid impact. But that's what I would do. Whew. All right. It was a long point, but I'm ready to wrap this thing up. But thank you guys so much for joining in on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day, and we will see you guys back on Friday on this edition of the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, you guys. See you all soon.
Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.